and with that mixture inside.
Should you know everything?
Tu as appris que tu t'es marié, tu as eu des enfants et tu as divorcé après.
Ah, Garba,
Ah, voisin,
ça va?
comment tu vas?
Comment vas-tu?
Tu vas bien?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Ça
Tu
va?
connais?
Merci.
C'est Haroun Mahamat Saleh, notre cinéaste. Ouais, c'est lui, hein, c'est lui, c'est lui. Ouais, c'est lui.
J'ai quelque chose à vous dire. Attends, j'arrive.
So this is clearly a very personal film, but a film that is also, it uses a great deal of fictional narrative, storytelling. It's almost as if, as the movie goes on, it gets swept up in more kinds of fiction in a way. How did you choose this method of telling this story? At any point, did you want to make just a documentary, or like that without a fiction to it, or was it always something that you knew was going to go into fiction?
Well, oui, merci. So I'm going to switch from English to
Okay.
French. It depends how deep is the question. And so, yeah, I wanted to mix, documentary and fiction. And I think that the difference, if there is a difference, it's a question of mise en scène, how you try to I don't find another word, it depends of how you direct, and you make your mise en scène, and in a way, documentary could like a fiction, and sometimes you have fictions, they look like documentaries, and I like when I feel myself like, watching a film, a fiction, and believing that it's true, and sometimes you have some documentaries and you can't believe them. You think that it's a fiction, and I think that this is a question of real point of view of how making mise en scène, and I wanted to try that. It was just like I was young. It was like 20 years ago. I didn't care, It was just like I said to myself, let's do that. And first it was a short, and so we shot it just like in 15 days. And I was just like innocent,
You felt free. Still.
Yeah, and very free, and I had no distributor, so you don't have anyone. I mean, it was a small budget, no one cares. You lose the money, it's not a problem, you don't lose. No one was expecting something, so it was great. I was young and naive,
Well, it seemed,
and dreamer also.
Yeah,
it helps sometimes.
It's interesting what you say about mise en scène, because it seems like you put a documentary technique in the film with the device of the video camera. So that is sort of explicitly putting a documentary form within the fiction. How did you decide to do that, to add that element?
Well, I decided to do that just to have like a kind of talking about the present life, and something which is the past. The documentary is just like a kind of report. I mean, the camera is just like I'm talking to you, and I'm also shooting at the same time. And the fiction is this, let's say, lost part of life, It's just like fiction is a kind of past of the present life, And so that's the way how I decided to use this camera, and a kind of report, just like, we.
Yeah. Well, you have these multiple layers of almost like tenses, temps, like of different like verb tenses in the film. I mean, you have the voiceover, you have the black and white, you have the scenes that are unfolding in front of us, and then at the end, you have this interesting kind of twist where you say, now I'm ready to make the film by Africa.
Oui. So, that's right. Yeah, it was a kind of Russian, dolls. I structured the film, like comme des poupées russes. Babushka,
the dolls
like
within
babushka.
dolls,
Yeah,
nested.
yeah. So, and it was interesting for me, but because at this time when I started making films, I used to go to a festival, and everywhere, in the early 80s, etc., you have a lot of symposium and forum conferences about African cinema, and we talk, and with the future, and I said, well, just stop talking, let's make films, and so I started just like to try to bring an answer by making this film without a lot of means, and just like with my heart and with a lot of reflection, to bring answers, because we were looking for answers at this time about how try to build a kind of economy for African cinema and etc. And at least the film becomes a kind of memory, and when I saw the last images, it's just like very touching, because all this corner where I shot, this film, it was my neighborhood, but it has been destroyed, totally destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore, and we have just like a hospital there. Well, we love hospitals, but we love also, this corner was the first one, this neighborhood. So, and the film is just like, it talks to people. It's always screened, in chat, because it remember people something. I mean, it doesn't exist anymore, so it becomes, and I'm happy for that, because I did it in a way, in the same way, and it becomes a useful film, and I love that, the work sometimes appears like useful,
Yeah, I mean, it's a record. It becomes like a documentary.
Absolutely, yeah.
What was it like, acting and directing at the same time, playing a character like that? Did you find yourself like exploring emotions that way? Was it like cathartic in some way, or?
No, I don't think so, because I was looking for an actor, and I saw several people, and I wasn't convinced, So but I knew that it was talking about me in a way, and so I wanted to act. But it's a kind of duty, It wasn't like an issue to explore something. It was just like my duty, and it's my personal, life, and I have to be there. It's just like I saw 5, 6 people, and I wasn't, happy with them, and I knew that, it's my own story, and I have maybe to be in this film. So I did it just by duty, but not in a way of trying to work, in a certain sense. Yeah.
It's also interesting. I kind of ask that because the movie comes out, it arises out of many different impulses in a way that, many different places. And one significant impulse is guilt, right? Isn't there a big sense of guilt? So I was wondering if, after you made the film, you kind of felt like a burden had lifted a little bit, because at the end you say, like, I'm at a calm place now. I asked that just to explanation because it's in the Me program, so I wouldn't be asking so directly.
No, it's okay. Si j'ai bien compris, je vais quand même. I have an interpreter here, so it's not fair, to not just let's work together.
Right. Well, I can't say I felt guilty about something. It's more the main character that felt some guilt. For myself, it was more like, some melancholy, going back to my native country. I've left my country without actually taking a firm decision or anything. It happened. And well, but one can say indeed that the character, the main character, feels relieved a bit, lighter of heart, because there's this project of starting up a new cinema, a small cinema theater.
How has the situation changed? You know, it seemed like film exhibition was in very poor shape, and filmmaking and film production. I was looking up an old interview with you, and in 2002 there were only maybe 2 filmmakers from Chad. How has the situation changed?
Well, this film was a kind of, it's a kind of gift, not a divine one, but it's just like a gift, because the cinema you have seen in the film, Normandy, it has been renovated, in 2010, and it opened, and it works nowadays. It's the only cinema theater we have in Chad, and it's because we won the jury prize in Cannes, and though the government was so proud, and they decided to renovate, and so we have a kind of, a very beautiful cinema theater. More than this one, I think. He's just like, and even we have like 35 millimeter, projection, and we have digital projection, and we have also the possibility, to screen movies by satellite, but they don't want to deal with us, Hollywood. It seems that, we are not fiable. On n'est pas. Yeah, they don't want to trust us. I don't know why, but well, so
so it's improved somewhat.
Yeah. So it has changed something, but we are always 2 filmmakers, and we have now a young filmmaker. He made 2 shorts, and he was in competition 2 years ago in FESPACO in Ouagadougou. So, and young people are coming, so I hope that we will see more and more films from Chad in the upcoming years.
Yeah. I thought it was such a beautiful and generous gesture in the film that you make a point of giving the camera to the nephew character, that your character makes of giving to the nephew.
Yes, but that the question, it's an idea of transmission, just like I think that for any work, you need to transmit it. If not, it's just like it's done, it's dead. So just the gesture have to continue, and you have to give it to someone else. There is a guy from Burkina Faso called Sotigi Kouyaté. He was an actor, and he used to work with Peter Brook, and he used to say that I am just like a wind, and if you want life to turn and turn, you need several forms of winds and etc. And that you open the first wind, open the door, the second one, could enter, and etc. etc. So it's important to transmit. This idea of transmitting things is very important, essential in what I'm doing. What I can tell you is just like more than making the film, when I'm on the set, the most important thing is how people in my country, because they are in a set, because they discover cinema, because they work and they change. There is a kind of transformation. And this one is more important for me in a human way than making the film itself, because the real cinema and the real stories are on the set between people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and were you mainly getting actors from who did films or theater, or where were you getting them?
They are from theaters, and I met just like Isabelle, she's a model, and she was just like in Chad for a weekend or something, and I was, all the staff of people, models, just like walking, and I was just like drinking a cup of champagne and watching this beautiful ladies, and I said, well, this one is really, she could be an actress. And by the way, she was studying theater in Ivory Coast, and she accepted to act. So, but all these people are non-professional, you know. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm curious, you just talked about the idea of transmission, and are there any filmmakers that for you, you felt like you were transmitting from, you know? I mean, it seems that Godard is one filmmaker that you kind of, you like a lot from this film at least.
Yeah, because I think you have, in my opinion, I would say that there are two categories of filmmakers. Those who, when you watch the film, you can be inspired, you know, just like, I want to make a movie. And those, you know, they can be great filmmakers. You watch their film and it's just like a kind of oeuvre. It's huge, you know, but it's not inspiring at all. It's just like, oh God, this is cinema. But I mean, you can't be inspired by that. So the filmmakers I love is all these filmmakers, you watch the films and then they give you the envy just to move on and to make a film. And this is the generosity of some filmmakers. And I would like to be part of these people.
Yeah,
just like making films to let people, you know. And I heard a lot when I made this film, you know, I had several screenings and I have like filmmakers really, they told me, oh, you know, it's really very inspiring and etc. And I was so happy, you know. It's
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like Kubrick might be the kind of awesome kind of
yes,
filmmaker.
yeah.
And
Kubrick and also, you know, the Russian one.
Tarkovsky.
Yeah.
That's like, that looks great, but I you
Yeah.
know, I'm just going to look at it. Godard is an interesting one because I feel like early Godard you're inspired by because he kind of was run, you know,
Yes,
breathless.
yeah.
You know?
Yes, yeah. Because Godard is really the guy who he speaks a lot about cinema, and no one, as a filmmaker, when you turn around the world, we did the filmmaker that every young filmmaker knows, you know, and even if he has not a great success, but we know that this guy is our memory, so he belongs to everyone, and because he helped us, you know, by his works, his research, and so yeah, in a way, Godard opened, you know, some windows for us. So I like very much Godard. I love Kiarostami also, which is generous. Agnès Varda, you know, is just like this is it's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought a bit about I think Makhmalbaf a little bit. He has the
Makhmalbaf.
casting. It
Yeah.
reminded me a little of the casting.
Yeah. Salam Cinema. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
Salam
Yeah,
Cinema.
yeah.
And I mean another conversation that the film is a part of a little is this idea of the end, you know, the feeling of endings. And you know, you made the film in 1998 or so, so a lot of people were thinking about the end of the millennium, but also the end of cinema. And you know, then the worry was in Chad that people were going to cine clubs instead of going to cinemas, and maybe also video a little. People were worried about how has that changed, you know, for you?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, the transition was quiet, you know, and it hasn't changed anything because just you have young people, they don't know anything about 35 millimeters. Not the fact. So, but I mean, nowadays we have a lot of, I mean, ignorant people, and they want to make things, so they don't know the history of cinema, but it's not a problem, you know. I think it's not a problem. It's just a question of having a point of view and having something to tell to people at a certain time, you know. So we, as an elder, you know, we think that they need these young people, you know, to know more about the history of cinema, but they make films and series in Chad, you know. They don't know even African cinema, but they don't care about it. So I think that in a way, making cinema is also just moving on and make what you want.
Yeah, I guess
yeah.
sometimes oblivion can be a start for creativity if you forget the past.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to go back to making this film, what did it look like? Like your screen, was it just like a regular screenplay? Like you wrote out all of it, or were you finding things a little bit while you were making it?
Yes. First, as I said, I made a
Short. version,
short. Yeah, it was a short script, and then I changed a lot of things while we were shooting. Every day, just and then I decided the voiceover comes later. Because I was just like. Yeah, I changed a lot during the shooting, but I love that, I used to write, every night, and so I changed a lot of things, and I worked also during the editing. I went back to Chad and I shot some pictures and etc. So it was a long process, of yeah.
And with the non-professionals you're working with, for example, the face-to-face interview with the woman whose father owned the theater, was she regarding that as something she was performing, or was it more of an interview for her?
Yeah, it was an
What was the
interview.
feeling?
I really, it's a real casting, people came there, and at this time, in '89, we didn't have like any radios, I mean international radios like BBC, etc. on FM, on the radio. In '98, we had only the national radio, so you can listen this one, you can pay, and then they can say, yeah, Mahamat Saleh Haroun is looking for actors, so you can be at this place at this time, and etc. And I had huge people, like 500 people, they want to become actors. But nowadays, no one, listen to our radio because we don't have the last, music by I don't know, Eminem and all these guys, Snoop Dogg.
Right.
So they used to listen to BBC and etc. And so if you make an announcement at the national radio, it's impossible, no one come,
No one's listening.
I tried that. It doesn't work anymore. So at this time we had people, and I mixed two things. We have real actors and real people who came there just by, they want to become actors.
They're curious.
Yeah. And it's always these sequences of casting are very powerful, in my own life, because I'm preparing my next film, and I was in Chad like 2 months ago, and I was looking for a young girl, 10 to 12 years, and she came there and she started talking and etc. And I asked her why she want to make cinema and play in a film, and she said, I want to make cinema because we are poor. We are poor, and it's devastating, It's just like I want to earn money, and we don't have money, and I want to make cinema because it's a way to. So, but it's a huge, reason, to make cinema in a way, and I meet a lot of. That's why I'm saying that what's happening outside the film is more important for my life than making the film itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what did you feel? What did you feel you learned when through that process, just talking to people? That you didn't know before about the area or about people there.
Every person is just like a kind of scape, a landscape. So you discover something new, It's just like they give you something, because it's a process where you ask people and they just give you answers. So they give you a part of themselves. And as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, you are always, trying to, like Dracula, to find, stories from the others. So, yeah, it's a kind of richness. It's the place where I try to. I don't try. It's just like you can't forget some stories because they stay there.
Yeah. One other part of the story that's interesting is when you start out in the movie, your character says, "I want to make a movie that's about my grief as a tribute to my mother," and then a lot of it ends up being about cinema and exhibition. So it's easy to kind of make a connection there and feel that in some way, cinema is occupying a very almost like parental, very primary space for you in some way.
Yes, yeah, it's a kind of maybe, yeah, because it's a place where you discover also something very quelque chose de qui est de l'ordre de l'amour maternel en fait dans le cinéma. Il y a quelque chose de comme ça qu'on retrouve. Enfin, comme les bras, comme ça, on se réfugie dans le cinéma en fait. Pour se raconter, pour raconter son intimité. Donc, il y a quelque chose de cet ordre-là. Passer de la mer au cinéma, mais il fait un film parce qu'il y a aussi un vide en réalité. Et il se rend compte qu'il y a un vide et les deux se rejoignent puisqu'il y a l'absence de la mer, mais l'absence de cinéma tout court aussi, en fait, dans ce territoire-là, à ce moment-là.
Yes, well, that's right in a way, because it's a bit, what the character finds is a bit of motherly love in a way that is found again, like an embrace where one can find shelter and tell one's story. And so from the mother to the cinema seems then a logical transfer, but also at the same time there's an emptiness because the mother is lacking, and an emptiness also because the cinema is also lacking in a way, is disappearing. And so these two emptinesses then join together. So there's an absence that the character needs to fill.
Parce que la mère et la salle de cinéma le ramène à son enfance aussi, à son adolescence et tout ça. Et en fait, ces deux mamelles disparaissent en même temps. Et donc, le lien est assez évident, si je puis dire. Voilà.
Right. Because there's a sort of similarity from the mother's embrace to the cinema room, and it relates back to adolescence in a way, and they are like the two breasts that are feeding, and so it's a fairly obvious link between the two, actually.
And I think we're probably just wrapping up soon, but just one last question. I'm curious, were you able to show the film to like members of family or neighbors at some point, and how did they react?
Well, I was just like, my mother is still alive, so I was a little bit like worried, and I didn't know how he's going to react because I was saying that she's dead in the film, so I was really very confused, and so I sat down in the court and I start like blah, 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 and then I said, I'm going to screen my new film, my first feature, etc. And in the film, I said that I lost my mother, etc. But it's a fiction, it's not reality, that, and etc. And she said, yeah, I understand because, I used to watch film on TV and I see the same actors killed and then they come back in other films. So it's just like cinema. So that was great. And the second reaction was my father. Because we watched the film with the family, we were sitting there, you know, and when my father saw me with the girl, as I had like young sisters, you know, sitting there, only sisters, 4, you know, and when I switched off the light, he screamed, you know, he said, "Ah!" And he was just like, it was spontaneous, you know, and so that was the 2 reactions. But if not, it was just like, no, at this time there was no cinema theater, so we screened the movie at the Institut Français, and we had a lot of people because it was the first feature, you know, in Chad. So it was a big event, you know, and the reaction was very, very good, and people was really they felt that it's they had the feeling that it was the first time that they see their city like that, you know, with all this garbage and etc. And they were really astonished, and they said, "So our city is so dirty. How could we?" And I said, "No, yeah, this is the reality." But it changed now. You know, we have more. I mean, we have some oil, and so we had changed some things. But well,
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much.
welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Merci. Thank you.